Outlaw Sports is brought to you by Molson Canadian, made from Canada, and Rocky Mountain Barbecue, Alberta barbecue cuisine at its best. With the NHL training camps not too far away, I want to ask you a question about the Calgary Flames, and you can get a heated debate either way. Do they use Kiprusov too much? I mean, okay, there it is. Good night,
Good night.
everybody. The point is going to make, Grant, Tim Thomas, 57 games last year, Luongo 60, and there were your two Vezina Trophy finalists and your Stanley Cup finalists. Kiprusov, 6 straight years, 70-plus games. They were in 10th spot last year. I don't think the guys really had one of those sensational years since 2009, 2010. To me, I think the guy gets burnt out, and I think the team suffers too much.
This is brought up, it seems like, for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we loved seeing Kiprusov as much as we could see him play.
Sure.
Now we're seeing him play too much, and every year the Flames say we're going to watch it, we're going to monitor it, we're not going to practice him too much, and they've been doing that. They've been better away from the game. So fans may see him playing a lot, but they're not seeing him practice a lot like they used to. So I think he's getting more rest away from the games. But I think now with Henrik Karlsson back for a second year, and I do think he's going to be a better backup than what people may think he can be. Kiprusov would be better playing 60 to 65 games a year and letting the backup play 20 or something like that, at least that. If they could do that, Mike, I agree that Kiprusov, who's now mid-30s, he has to have more rest. And I think the Flames will be better served, and Kiprusov would play better come March.
And there have been times, Grant, when the backup has been in and they didn't play him against a lesser team and they lost, and I thought, well, if Kiprusov would have been in, they probably would have won that game. But it's a catch-22.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is.
It's a double-edged sword where you think you want Kiprusov in there to win the games, but it seems like the Flames have wanted to rest him more in games and not been able to do it for some reason. I think because they're battling for their lives, they're battling to make their playoff lives, and that's why they play him so much. But I think if they're smart long-term, they would follow a game plan, Mike, that would say he plays 55 to 65 games, somewhere in there. But Karlsson, if he can prove, and I think we saw a little bit last year, he could win, and he did win some games, that they got to use him more. I think that would be smart for the Flames.
I think it is smart. You said something last week during our show that made me think, and it was all about the fighting. And they're talking about the hard hits, and they're talking about, and you brought up the point about a punch and how devastating that can be. I started looking into all the different things, and with Rick Rippon's passing and Bugard's passing, Derek Bugard's passing this year, and the troubles that these tough guys are going through. You know, the tough guys play an interesting role in the game of hockey, in the society of hockey. They're all alone out there. They're tough guys. They have to go battle, and it's not an easy job, and it eats away at your mind. But when you think back about some of the guys in the last few years that have had to have counseling because of a grant, and I wrote down some names: Brian McGrattan, Bob Probert, Ken Danico, and Jordan Tutu, all tough guys that for some reason or another it was eating them away. They had to get into the substance abuse program in the NHL. And I guess the problem is, as I'm seeing it, is sometimes because you're the tough macho guy, a lot of people don't think you need that kind of counseling. They look at you too soft. You're a human being. Mm-hmm. That's a tough role to fill. And I wonder if this isn't some of these guys just not living up to the expectations or the stereotypes.
It is, and they're one or two punch by not giving one or two punch away from losing a job, or one or two punch from taking it too much out of a job too. So that has to be tough, where if a goal scorer goes on a bit of a scoring drought, he's probably going to still be playing a little while longer, where fighters aren't. Do you think, though, that how many right wingers or defensemen are falling to this problem too? Are we just focusing in on the fighters? Do they get the headlines? Are there other players, and even guys in other professions, have the same problems too? Why is it just the fighters? Is it because of fighting? Is it because of the profession? I don't know that. I don't know that. It might be, but I'm just wondering if it's because we're glorifying their position so much that we think that it's a direct result of it. I'm not sure.
Well, it's interesting. Sure. You know, I'm looking at this too, Grant, and I'm looking at I'm looking at the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. The Bruins, without Sean Thornton, were a different team with Sean Thornton in it. And when he was inserted back into Game 3, to me personally, that gave them more room. That shut up the Lapierres. I mean, without the enforcers out there, you're going to get a lot of Jack Russell Terriers yipping and yapping. Yeah. You need the big dog to kind of curb all that. They do police the business.
How did the Detroit Red Wings win without that kind of guy? How do they do that then?
I'm not saying, Grant. It just seems to be cyclical in the NHL. And the one thing I noticed in the NHL, though, Grant, in more this year than any other year, tough guys, when they get a guy down, they'll let up. When they beat the guy, and I've seen it more times than enough, and he's in a vulnerable position, instead of doing what they would do in the 80s, beat the living crap out of him. If you're Philadelphia or Boston, you got a guy down, you kick the shit out of him. And you left your message, or you challenged the whole team. Now it seems to be, believe it or not, the tough guys seem to have a gentleman code.
They're getting soft. What do you mean by tough guy? Like, who are we talking about here? Are we talking about players who could play? I guess Probert could play. Mark Rippon, you know, he was a feisty little guy. He wasn't a heavyweight. He's only about 5'10", probably. They say 5'11", even more like 5'10".
Those guys almost scare me more than the big guy coming at you, because no fear.
But I think there is a place for those kinds of players in the league, like Sean Thornton. I mean, he can play it any way. He can still play on a fourth line and get it done. Those kinds of players, I think, are valuable because they can play a little bit of minutes. They can get in your face. They're not going to fight you. They're just going to stare at you, stare you down, and warn you. You were talking about the one punch. The one thing I was trying to say is that the NHL could help these guys and the guys in the future if they just took the punch out. Now, you like fighting in the NHL, don't you? I mean,
I do.
Most people do. Most people do.
Yeah.
I mean, even I like to watch a fight, but I still think the NHL is trying to change all its rules, help all these people. You know, look at counseling and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you took the punch out to the face, which can cause so much damage, and maybe these guys don't have to live by the punch, but just live by playing tough, solid, intimidating hockey, they would be served better off the ice too. So take the punch to the face, which can cripple a guy's life and probably cause death, but still keep intimidating hockey in there. And I don't think the NHL is prepared to do that. They want to keep it in there, but they want to cover it with these research and development camps, changing rules.
I think what happened if that fighting wasn't allowed, it'd be like when they brought in the visors and helmets. All of a sudden, the stick work started coming up a little more.
Call a penalty then.
I know, Grant, but you still need to have that.
But does Sean Thornton have to fight to be effective on the ice? No, he doesn't.
But if they know that that there's not going to be any fights, then that chippiness and that yappiness is going. It's again a double-edged sword, Grant. We just wanted to bring some issues out here, and with the recent passings this past year, I just thought it was an appropriate time to talk about that.
Well, it's true because tough guys do get the headlines, and 2 have died since May: Bugard and Rippon.
Yeah.
But one's 6'7", big, and that's all he was a goon, was a fighter. Rippon was a marginal NHL player, only 27, but a feisty guy who could play the game. Wasn't a goon, just a pesty, crazy forward. But how many other players who aren't in that role may have problems that don't get the recognition?
And here's one thing about stereotyping NHL tough guys. They may be mean bastards on the ice, but off the ice, a lot of them are great guys. Very accommodating guys to us media types. And if you look back at guys like even Tim Hunter, and you look back at all the tough guys, Semenko, McSorley, those were good guys. I mean, those are some of your best quotes you could ever get.
George Laraque is now with the Green Party. He's getting into a political career. He was one of the most feared. He was the most feared guy for his few years in the NHL, and so smart guys. So I'm a little leery of just saying these fighters have problems because, as you just mentioned, a lot of fighters have not had problems.
Maybe get rid of the Jody Shelleys that can't do anything but fight.
Oh, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Tired of going to redneck barbecues? Well, you better call Rocky Mountain Barbecue. Alberta barbecue cuisine at its best. Great tasting food, clean and efficient service. Check us out online or call Rocky Mountain Barbecue.